P7 and P11, that's where Mercedes qualified for the Australian Grand Prix this weekend. This is not what they were expecting and not for what they were hoping. While the likes of Carlos Sainz, who's just had his appendix out, literally was fighting for pole position in the Ferrari. This is a disaster of a weekend, particularly so after the team went back to their old spec floor that they used throughout testing before moving to a untested floor for the first 2 weekends of this season. The team thought perhaps with the updated floor that they brought to Bahrain for the first race weekend of the season that they might have found some sort of issues with it and they just hadn't been able to uncover it. And so in coming to Melbourne, the team decided to revert back to their test spec floor where they had a better balance and looked a lot more quicker in comparison to the other teams in and around their vicinity. But throughout FP1 and FP2, that seemed to not be the case at all, with both in terms of a performance and balance based situation. And Lewis Hamilton suffered the most this weekend and had a very unremarkable qualifying session, finishing in P11, while George Russell ended up in 7th, a mere 8/10 behind that of Verstappen's P1 position. And we didn't need to hear from the drivers to let us know just how bad this car was through the high-speed sections. It was quite evident, even from FP1. There was many and off for all the drivers, but the way in which the Mercedes car through the high-speed turns lost the rear end was just quite shocking, and particularly in the hands of George Russell, I thought he was going straight into the barrier, but he made an amazing save. And this continued on into FP2 for the team as well, with Hamilton. Speaking of Hamilton, he's put this as one of the worst sessions in a long time, which doesn't bode well for the rest of the weekend at all. The 7-time world champion said that in the first session, the sensations that he felt from the car weren't so bad. But the situation then clearly worsened after they made changes to their setup and probably like the ride height that they were using with the floor for FP2. And unfortunately, this made the car a lot worse. To continue our learning, Hamilton said we made some big changes into FP2 and unfortunately, this made the car worse. Now, as I just mentioned, of the changes that mainly involved the floor, with Mercedes reverting back to the specification used at the start of the tests in Bahrain. A step backwards that put Hamilton in the position of not being able to extract the maximum potential from the car due to the balance of it that gave him a lot of trouble. A significant effort now has to be undertaken to avoid running into a weekend that further worsens the start to this championship for Hamilton in particular. But in fascinating comparison, George Russell on the other side of the garage was a lot happier with his overall day. I had done an excellent lap on my last attempt on the soft tyre, but I went wide in the last couple of corners and I suffered some small damage to the front wing. Without that, I think we could have finished the session in 3rd place. He did, however, end up with the 7th fastest time, which is a lot better than what Hamilton has managed to achieve this weekend. And so you can quite clearly see he has a lot more confidence in the car, and particularly so, this probably stems from the setup in which they went in terms of the direction for the 2 drivers. But before we go any further, if you've enjoyed the content within this video, please consider subscribing, as I would greatly appreciate it, as I'm looking to grow this channel and I have a lot more content that I want to produce. And I may even be going to the Japanese Grand Prix later on in April, so I could have some really interesting content to bring you all. Right, back to the video. But the biggest question that still remains, away from the team just being outright slow through the high-speed corners at the moment in the real world with their W15, is actually, why is that the case? What is happening in the real world with the car through high-speed corners that is not allowing the car to reach peak performance through them, which the simulation data suggests they should? And it was very apparent, this weakness of theirs, for all to see. Just have a look at this clip on screen at the moment of Hamilton v Norris in the final stint in the Jeddah race while on soft tyres. Norris leaves Hamilton for dead in the space of what? 3 corners? That is crazy to witness visually. And it can't continue to happen for much longer. So will Mercedes find the problem? And secondly, can and how do they solve it? Well, I believe the answer to that question lies in one particular area, and it will also explain why the data in the sim is telling them one thing while in the real world it's a complete other story. Basically, the car is constantly bouncing far too much throughout the phases of a corner. And I'm talking, of course, about high-speed corners here. And it's playing havoc with the levels of downforce that the floor is generating for them. And this is where suspension plays such a vital role in your ability to stop this excessive bouncing, an area which Red Bull greatly excel at and has been a hallmark of their cars through the ground effect era. They have both an anti-dive and anti-squat design incorporated into their suspension systems, and this allows their cars, and obviously as an extension of that their drivers, a stable platform throughout the entire corner, meaning the downforce level produced stays constant, or at least a lot closer than what Mercedes currently experiences. And this of course gives the drivers confidence to know what the car is going to do and how it's going to feel or behave and how to react to that. But of course, it isn't just the suspension that plays a role in this outcome. The floor itself and its design is also an important factor in this process. If we were to compare the floors of both Mercedes and Red Bull, they would be dramatically different, I would suspect. And we had a very good look at that last season thanks to both teams having their floors exposed over the Monaco Grand Prix weekend. And what we gathered from that was the sheer amount of detail that is lacking on all of the cars in comparison to Red Bull. And of course this includes Mercedes. As you can see from the 2 pictures on screen now, there is a level of detail seen on the RB19's floor, and this can only have improved going into this season that is just miles above anything else that any of the teams have been able to do. And I believe this is another reason for the dramatic difference between all of the teams when it comes to race pace. They have that stable platform that enables them to have the downforce level they want throughout every phase of the corner. And this is a mysterious characteristic that the Mercedes team have to figure out and get on top of. And it is that very mysterious characteristic which isn't showing up in the sim world but is present in the real world that makes the W15 not perform as it should be in high-speed corners, where a combination of the bouncing and as a result of that, the constant loss and change of the downforce levels and grip is costing the team and its drivers a chunk of lap time to the opposition. And the team feels that this weakness is accounting for pretty much all of its deficit, as the car seems to be very competitive in all other areas of a track through all the other different speed ranges of corners. And so if the team are able to get on top of this phenomenon and unlock the high-speed corner performance that the sim data says this W15 has, then they're going to find a whole chunk of lap time. And I think with that, they will be able to fight their, current opposition a lot more closer on the track, and perhaps probably really would be a little bit ahead of them in certain aspects or in certain tracks. Right guys, that's the video. Hope you've all enjoyed it. If you have, leave a comment down below and I'll catch you in another video.